Good Monday morning, students. This is Mr. Martin. It is the 31st, getting ready to be September tomorrow. Hope our meeting Friday went well. I know that most of us were able to get on there and not have very much connection issues. There were some very good questions asked, and I tried to answer them as quickly and directly as I could. So today, I'm going to make this video. This is basically just going to be a narration of the safety PowerPoint. Every year, or the safety slideshow, I'm sorry. Every year when I first get students in, the first official week, I don't like to try to start something in the middle of a week, like on a Wednesday or a Thursday or something like that. So the very next Monday, I always start safety. And throughout the week, we will work our way through each section of safety. So this is going to be a fairly long video because I'm not going to make a bunch of separate ones. I'm just going to work my way through and discuss the safety stuff just as I would if the students were in front of me. And this is going to be available for students to watch. So if there are any questions about that slideshow, this probably will answer any of those questions that you might have. And this also might help some students that might have accommodations. You may not have those at home, so hopefully this will help you with that in terms of reading the slides and trying to explain some of the things a little more in depth. And I'm also going to give you some examples. There's specific things in there that I always give examples for because they're real world experiences that I have either personally been through or witnessed. So I'm going to present the screen. And we're going to jump over here. So everybody should have already done their introductions, either text message, shared it with me, or commented right there. Looks like there's still quite a few of you that have not done that. So if you want to receive a grade for that, I highly suggest you get that done. Otherwise, you will be getting a 0 for that particular activity. We're going to move down here. This is the focus for this week, and you need to do something similar here. So if you have looked at this slideshow, just write or comment seen or viewed or whatever you want to put. If you watch the video that I'm posting right now, you can do the same thing. But the first assignment is actually down here where it says safety discussion. So if we open this up, it's got several questions that you answer, and you're just going to answer them in the form of a comment. So identify the #1 injury that is common among auto technicians. You can find that information in this article right here. Identify one cause and one way to prevent slips, trips, and falls when working in the auto shop. How many eye injuries occur every day? And list 3 things that all hazardous chemicals must have to identify them. Again, all that stuff is going to be covered here in the information that we're given. And then all you have to do is answer these questions in the form of a comment. So you can just simply comment 1, 2, 3, 4 with your responses. And you can do that right here. So if you were going to submit a response to this, you would just simply put 1 and then your answer. 2, your answer. Okay? So that's all you got to do. I know there's a 5th one there. It's blank. There's only 4 questions. Okay, so that's the first assignment, but can't do that until I give you the information. So we'll jump back over here and go ahead and get started. So this is a safety slideshow. You just click on it. It's going to take you directly to it. And then once it loads, go ahead and present it. Okay, why is safety important? There's a number of reasons why safety is important. Obviously, safety is important because you don't want to get injured. Even the smallest injury can result in serious problems later on down the road. If you are injured, you may not be able to work. So the example that I give students every year is I ask them a question. What's the purpose of going to work? Why do you get up every single morning and go to work? And usually somebody raises their hand with the correct answer that I'm looking for. And the answer that I'm looking for is to earn money. You are going to work so that you can source an income, so that you can pay for the things that you want, your house or your toys or your motorcycles or 4-wheelers or whatever it is that you like. So if you get hurt, that might prevent you from actually going to work, and you won't be able to earn that income. Another good reason is by creating hazardous conditions, you put other people at risk. Anytime you put other people at risk, puts them in that same scenario, and it also could have ramifications legally on you. If you're responsible for a particular area, it is your job to maintain that area in some instances. And if you do not maintain it and you create a hazard for somebody else, that could fall back on you, and you could be the one winding up in trouble for not doing your job. So those are just two examples. There's an endless list of reasons why safety is important, but those are two that I always give with those specific examples, because I have seen people get hurt and have to take a week off without pay. And I have seen people get hurt because of messes that other people have created and then left and not taken care of. Somebody walks into a puddle of oil because they weren't paying attention, they slip and fall. That's just one example. So why is safety important? There's two reasons right there. You can probably think of some on your own as well. Okay, these are the three areas that we're going to focus on. Tool safety. So we're going to talk about different types of tools, and I'll give you a couple of examples. For instance, using a ratchet or a breaker bar to try and break a bolt loose. There's a proper way to do that and an improper way to do that. Fire safety, we're going to talk about the three main classifications of fire. We're going to identify each one, and we're going to talk about which one is the most common in the auto shop. And then we're going to talk about just general shop safety, some of the basic rules and regulations that go along with working in any shop, not just an auto shop, but any shop in general that has moving equipment. Same rules will apply for pretty much any shop area that you'll work in. Okay, so tool safety. Number one, it is important to know how to properly operate a tool before you use it. Now, if it's something simple like a screwdriver or a wrench or a ratchet, those things are pretty self-explanatory. Most students who take this class have used that in some way, shape, or form in the past. If you have never used a screwdriver, or if you don't know the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead, that's okay. I would be glad to explain that to you. But there's really not a lot of safety issues that go along with using the wrong screwdriver. But there are plenty of pieces of equipment where safety can become a factor. For instance, raising up a car on a two-post lift. If you don't have the lift positioned underneath the car correctly, it could fall on top of you and crush you, or severely damage the car and cause lots of money in damages. So before you use a piece of equipment, you want to make sure you know how to use it. If you improperly use a piece of equipment, you could also damage the piece of equipment, costing a lot of money. For instance, the brake lathe. You can do what's called crash the lathe, which means that you run it into another moving object, and it will severely damage it. It's a very expensive piece of equipment, so we don't want to do that. If you have any questions, be sure to ask. So again, if you don't know, ask. I would be glad to show you and explain it to you as many times as it takes. A lot of the pieces of equipment out here in the shop, we usually will do like a live demonstration on, and I'll probably be making some videos on that stuff and posting them for you guys to watch. Always use a tool for its intended purpose. For example, don't use a screwdriver for a pry bar. We have pry bars if you need a pry bar. Don't use a wrench for a hammer. We got a whole drawer full of hammers. If you need a hammer, get a hammer. Tools are not cheap. So if they are abused and misused, they get broken, and then we don't have them to use on jobs when we need them. Okay, a couple of examples of hand tools here. We've got a picture of a wrench and then three different size ratchets. When using hand tools such as wrenches, ratchets, torque wrenches, or breaker bars, be sure to pull and not push. You have better control when pulling, and you are less likely to injure yourself. So this is one of those examples that I always give students. Let's say that you're trying to break a bolt loose on an engine. Sometimes you will have to work on an engine while it is running. A lot of times engines have moving parts. So you've got a fan that may be moving, a mechanical fan. You've got belts that are turning. You've got pulleys that are turning. So if you're trying to make an adjustment on an engine while it's running, or you're trying to diagnose a problem on an engine while it's running, which does happen quite often, you're going to have your hands and face around all these moving components. So let's say that you have a bolt that's really, really tight. You're on the tool, you're on the fastener, and you're trying to, leverage your body against the force of that bolt and break it loose. So if you are pushing, if that bolt suddenly breaks loose, or if the tool decides it's going to break and you've got all your body weight leaned into it, your natural reaction when that happens is you're going to continue to go forward. And if your hand goes forward into a moving fan blade, it's going to be very, very bad for your hand. You might start losing some fingers. Your hand could get caught in the moving belt. If you have long hair, it could get caught in the moving belt. So all kinds of bad things can happen. Anytime that you're in a situation like that, you want to make sure that you are pulling. So position the tool in a fashion where you are going to be pulling towards yourself. So you might have to go to the other side of the car to make that happen. Or you might have to reposition your body to make that happen. Another option would be to simply turn the car off, break the bolt loose, and then start it back up for your diagnosis or adjustment or whatever it is that you're doing to it. So always think about those things while you're doing them. Mistakes can happen, and it can be very, very costly in terms of medical expenses. So always try to make sure you're pulling towards yourself. If you're pulling towards yourself and the tool breaks or the bolt breaks loose, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to hit yourself in the chest or leg or arm or wherever. Be sure to use the correct size socket or wrench. Standard and metric are two different sizes, so that is something that happens quite often. Students will be trying to break a bolt loose, and they'll be on just use a lug nut, for example. Most lug nuts on modern cars are either a 19 or a 21. So if you put a 22 millimeter socket on a 21 millimeter lug nut, it will fit, but a lot of times it will start to round or strip it off. Then you're going to create more work for yourself trying to repair that stripped out or broken fastener. It may also break the socket. And then you again have the issue where you don't have that tool again to use until we get it exchanged for a new one. So if you need a 13 or you need a 15, go get a 13 or a 15. Students ask me all the time, what's the same thing as a 13? A 13 is the same as a 13. A 13 and a half are very, very close, but they are not the same. Same thing goes for 14 and 9/16. Very, very close, not the same. 16 and 5/8, very, very close, not the same thing. So get the appropriate tool that you need so that you can avoid those types of situations. Do not over tighten a fastener. I've got that in big capital letters, and I'll use lug nuts again as an example for that. Over tightening fatigues, that means that it weakens the fastener, making it substantially weaker. It could cause injury, it could also break. So talking about lug nuts specifically, first thing that students want to do is they want to get an air impact or an electric impact, and they want to hammer that lug nut on. We don't do that in this shop. We will use a torque wrench on every single wheel that we put on every single vehicle before it leaves this building. The reason being, number one, we want to make sure that those lug nuts are tight. We do not want to leave lug nuts loose. If you're using an air tool, let's say the air pressure is low. Maybe the air compressor is not turned on. You might run the lug nuts down with that air tool thinking they're tight, and then the vehicle leaves the shop, the lug nuts fall off, and then the wheel comes off the car. We don't want that. The opposite is also true. If you have an impact with 200 foot-pounds of torque or 500 foot-pounds of torque, a lot of them are way more than that, and you're hammering a lug nut on, it might break it off. And if it doesn't break it off, it's going to be on there way tighter than it needs to be. And this will create a problem later down the road. So let's say that you do a tire rotation on somebody's car, or you do a brake job on somebody's car, and you hammer on all four wheels with an impact wrench. They get 10 miles down the road and run over a nail. That has nothing to do with the work that you performed. However, they are now going to have to change their tire and put a spare on. They probably are not going to be able to break those lug nuts loose with the basic tire tool that's provided with the vehicle. So we will use a torque wrench. And again, that's something I always give a live demonstration on, show students how it needs to be done, how I like to see it done, and then I have them practice it over and over and over and over again. First year that I taught, had a group of students, very small group of senior students. I think there was about 5 in that class, all very good students. But They were very young and didn't necessarily want to follow the instructions given. So we did a brake job on another teacher's car, co-worker's car, and I gave them instructions and they didn't follow them. And that teacher called me that night and told me, hey, just want to let you know a couple of these lug nuts were loose. Nothing bad happened. Wheel didn't come off, nothing like that, but he just wanted to let me know so I could let the students know. And I told him to bring the vehicle back. And he said, well, I've already tightened them up. It's not a big deal. And I said, bring the vehicle back tomorrow. So the next day he brings it back. And when those students come in, they were an afternoon group of students, so they got there about like 12:30. When they get there, that truck is back in the shop, and they say, what are we going to do to that truck? And I give them instructions to go outside, jack the truck up, put it on a jack stand, and take the driver's front wheel off. So they did. And then they said, now what are we going to do? And I said, put the wheel back on. And they did. And then I had them torque the lug nuts. Watched them torque the lug nuts, 5 lug nuts. And then they said, now what are we going to do? And I said, keep doing that until the bell rings. So that put that in their mind that they weren't going to make that mistake again, because they had that wheel on and off about 6 or 7 times just to make sure that they understood they could not let the vehicle leave the shop like that. It's unacceptable. Okay, so hand tools are not cheap. Injury is not the only factor when talking about hand tool safety. If you break tools, you can't use them when you need them. Keep tools organized to avoid clutter in the shop. Tools should be clean and put away every day. This is something that is always a problem in the vocational school setting. You've got 40, 50 kids using the same sets of tools. We've got 3 toolboxes in this shop. And for the most part, I'll use one of them for the first group of students, one of them for the second group of students, and one of them for the senior third group of students. So you've got all these students doing 2 or 3 different projects or 2 or 3 different jobs using the same set of tools. If all we did was clean the tools up and put them away, we would never get any work accomplished. So we don't necessarily do that every day, but usually every week we will gather up our tools and put them away. So keeping the tools organized in a working shop is difficult to do, but it is manageable. And we do make sure that we do that at least once a week so that we can have things ready to go for the following week. And usually at the end of every course, we will put every single tool back where it goes so that it's ready to go for the next course. So here we've just got an example. That's what a professional tool set would probably look like. This is what my toolbox looks like for the most part. I don't have carpet in my drawers, but I do have wrench holders just like that. Screwdrivers are nice, neat little holders, not just kind of laid out, but I like for it to be easily identifiable. When you pull a tool out, you should see a vacant spot so that you can tell there's something missing there. Okay, pneumatic, that's what that P word is, pneumatic tool safety. Pneumatic tools are power tools that are powered by compressed air. So we have a large air compressor here in the school, and all of our air tools, our air ratchets, air impacts, air hammers, those are all pneumatic power. Ear protection may be necessary when using certain tools. So there is one thing that must always be worn, safety glasses. Safety glasses must be worn anytime we're out in the shop. But ear protection is not something that's necessarily mandatory until you get a certain noise level or decibel level. But there are some people who may be a little more sensitive to the noise than others. For instance, if someone wears hearing aids, they are going to be driven absolutely insane by the noise in the shop. So it may be necessary for them to turn those off or wear some type of an earmuff so that they're not just getting blasted with all that noise. If something is above a certain decibel level, which you'll hear about in the OSHA training, then you have to wear hearing protection as a mandatory procedure. There is not much in the auto shop that requires that. Prolonged use, however, of air tools can cause hearing impairments over time. So a lot of older technicians, you'll be trying to have a conversation with them and they'll say, huh? They can't hear you because for the last 30 years, they've been beating and banging with air tools and no ear protection. So we have a whole drawer full of disposable earplugs. If you would like a set, please just let me know and I will issue those to you. They're disposable. You use them for the day and throw them away. They're very, very cheap. We can also get a set of regular ear muffs if that's more comfortable for you. Never, ever direct compressed air towards yourself or another individual. This is a big, big, big no-no. So this is something that will get you thrown out of my shop. I will make you come sit in the classroom and you will not be welcome out there anymore. This is a big, big issue. It doesn't take very much air pressure to blow out somebody's eardrum or potentially make somebody go blind. There's a lot of dangers associated with compressed air. We're talking about 150 to 170 pounds of air at the regulator. So you always be very, very careful when using compressed air. And you never direct it toward yourself or anybody else with a blowgun or a blow nozzle. There are certain situations where we might use compressed air to clean off a workbench or dry off a part that we have cleaned in the parts washer. And in that circumstance, we're going to make sure we're using very, very regulated air pressure down to about 25 or 30 PSI. And it has to have a rubber tipped nozzle. Air bubbles can pass through the skin and turn into an air embolism in your bloodstream. It's also a danger. Compressed air can be used to dry parts as long as the airflow is regulated. So we would have to walk over to the regulator, turn the pressure down, dry off our component, and then turn the air pressure back up, because 25 or 30 pounds of air pressure will not run an air hammer or an air impact. So again, this right here, the very top line, if I catch you doing something like that, you will find yourself out of the shop, most likely permanently. Do not do it. Tools such as impact wrenches require the use of impact sockets, and there are certain situations where this cannot be done. So I'll give you an example. Impact sockets are black, they're thicker, and they're heavier duty, and they're designed to take a beating. Chrome sockets are thin, they're chrome plated, and they're not designed to take a beating. But here's a perfect example of when you may have to break that rule. A lot of times aftermarket wheels will come with the very small spline drive lug nuts. You cannot fit an impact socket inside of the wheel well hole where the lug nut is because the socket's so big, it's so big around, it's so thick. So you have to use a thinner chrome wall socket, and a lot of times those lug nuts will come with a special socket. You're not supposed to use an air tool on those. But again, other people that may have worked on the car before you get it probably or may not have followed that rule that we will follow using a torque wrench. So that is an exception to the rule. And you have to understand that using chrome sockets or using an impact on those specialty sockets, a lot of times will break them. So that means that you're going to have to be prepared to replace that tool if that happens. Impact sockets are thicker and are designed to take the abuse, but sometimes they just simply can't be used. And that's just one example. Okay, fire safety. Fire safety is probably the biggest risk factor dealing with automobiles. Most automobiles are powered by gasoline. So gasoline is highly volatile. It is explosive. It is dangerous. It will burn the shop down to the ground. You have to respect the power of gasoline. And we are working directly across the street, or across the hallway rather, from an active welding shop. Welding produces sparks all day long. So less than 50 feet away from each other, we have cars full of gasoline and sparks. They are separated by doors and whatnot, but a lot of times we'll be doing welding or grinding procedures in the auto shop. So you have to be very, very cautious when dealing with gasoline. Okay, the very first thing is to have an exit strategy. This is part of a fire prevention plan. That's something else that you'll also hear in regards to the OSHA training that you'll get later on this year. But you guys and girls have been in school for some time now. If you're in this class, you're at the very minimum a ninth grader. So for the last 9 or 10 years, you have been practicing something in school every single month. And you've probably done it so much that you know exactly what to do when that bell or that siren goes off. And I'm talking about a fire drill. Within the first 30 days of school, we have to have a fire drill. And you have one every single month following that. That's part of the procedure, and that's part of the exit strategy in every school building. And it's posted on the wall in every single classroom. So always have a plan or exit strategy before the fire occurs, and it's going to be different in different parts of the building. So for instance, in the auto area, the auto students and the welding students, and probably also the industrial maintenance students, we're going to exit out one portion of the building. The nursing students and the business and IT students who are on the opposite end of the building, they're not going to walk all the way through the burning building to come out our exit. They have their own exit strategy. The people in the office also have a different exit strategy. So essentially, you're going to take the nearest exit. But we also have to make sure that we stay together. We can't just all separate, because we have to make sure that we keep track of every student, every person that comes in and out of this building. Fire drills, again, are routinely practiced. Fire extinguishers are placed throughout the lab. We've also got one very, very close to the classroom. They can be easily located by looking for a tag or a sticker similar to the one in this picture. May not be exactly the same, but it's going to be pretty close. There are different classifications of fires and also different classifications of fire extinguishers that go along with them. So there are three main categories of fire. There are more than three, but there's only three that we are going to focus on. You need to know what kind of fire you are dealing with before you act. So if you are on a volunteer fire department, or if you have a parent or uncle or some sibling who is on a fire department, you've probably heard this before. All fires require three main components in order to burn. And here they are. You guys are probably too young to know about Smokey the Bear, but when I was a young person in my youth, used to be commercials on TV all the time, following episodes of Gumby and things like that about Smokey the Bear. And the slogan was, "Only you can prevent forest fires," and it always had something similar to this. So the elements of fire always contain some type of fuel. Fuel does not necessarily have to be a liquid. Paper is a source of fuel. But in our case, working with cars and trucks, gasoline and motor oil and transmission fluid, those are all going to be examples of fuels. Heat, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a spark. It can also just be friction. If you take your hands and rub them together, they start to get very hot. So friction can cause fire as well. And then oxygen. Oxygen is in the air. It's in the atmosphere all around us. So that's something that is constantly present. If you add these other two things, a fire can start pretty easily. Here's our different classifications of fire. So we've got a Class A fire. And a Class A fire has a picture of a trash can or a picture of a wood pile. It's a symbol that is the letter A, and it says ordinary combustibles. So think about anything that you would throw in a trash can. Paper, plastic, anything along those lines that goes in a typical waste basket is considered a Class A fire. Class B, which is what we typically will deal with the most in the automotive setting, flammable liquids such as gasoline, oil, grease, tar, oil-based paint, lacquers, and any other flammable liquid form of gas. So everything on a car that's a liquid is going to be petroleum-based for the most part. We're talking about gasoline, diesel fuel, motor oils, transmission fluids, brake fluids, even some antifreezes are flammable if they get hot enough. So Class B, that's the red, letter B, flammable liquids. And then Class C. Class C is an electrical fire, energized pieces of equipment that plug into a wall. So it's got that picture of a wall outlet. So this could be wiring, fuse boxes, circuit breakers, machinery, appliances. It could also be handheld tools such as a drill or a reciprocating saw. Now, before you go to extinguish a fire, it's very important that you understand first what type of fire you're dealing with. So to give you a perfect example, again, you've probably heard this before, water and oil do not mix. So if you have a Class B fire, let's say that you have a typical, grease style fire, kitchen fire even. If you take a bucket of water and throw it on top of that, it's going to get twice as big and twice as nasty really fast because water and oil do not mix. The oil or the gasoline or whatever it is that's burning is going to actually spread out if you throw water on top of it, because the water is actually going to get underneath of that oil. Water is heavier than oil. So it's going to get underneath it, and it's going to cause it to spread out and get larger. It's not going to put it out. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, fire departments put out, all types of fires with water. That is true, but they're using thousands of gallons of water per minute, and they're using it at a very, very high pressure. So a bucket of water is not the same thing. Okay, if you have a tank truck and a 6-inch hose with 100 pounds of water pressure, that will put it out. But throwing a 5-gallon bucket of water on top of it, that's not quite the same thing. Be sure to use the correct extinguisher for the correct class and type of fire. Okay, so we got a couple of examples here. We got a water type extinguisher. So this is like a water bottle. Class A fires only. You can see here, if you look at the label, it has a picture. This is called a pictogram. It has all 3 on it, and 2 of them are crossed out, meaning you cannot use this on these 2 types of fire. If you use it on a Class C fire, you're probably going to get electrocuted because water is a conductor. If you use it on a Class B fire, you're going to make it larger and worse. You can only use this on Class A fires. Then we've got the carbon dioxide extinguisher. Carbon dioxide is something that is going to displace or take away the oxygen. It says Class B and C fires has limited range and affected by draft and wind. So if you're outside, this probably isn't going to be a good choice because you might spray it and the air or the wind might just carry it away. Dry chemical extinguishers. These are things that you will typically find within a school building, in the auto shops especially. So Class B and C fires includes a sodium and potassium bicarbonate base agent. So this is like a dry white powder. When you spray it out, it comes out almost as a mist. And when it dries, it leaves that white or yellowish film. These are referred to as general purpose. You can see, got that pictogram, none of them are crossed out. We've got foam extinguishers, Class A and B, not effective on flammable liquids and gases. So this would not be a good option for the auto shop. Okay, halon. This is one of the most popular, but it's also one of the most expensive. And one of the reasons that these are particularly good in auto applications is if you take one of those dry chemical fire extinguishers and you spray it down on a running engine, then that engine is going to suck up all those powdered materials and it's going to ruin it. A halon extinguisher will not harm any electronics. It will not harm the engine either. It simply is going to smother the fire out. So these are very, very good in office buildings. A lot of places, instead of traditional sprinkler systems, will have a halon system. So if you got an office building full of millions of dollars worth of electronic equipment, this would probably be the best option versus a water system. Same thing goes for shops. If you have a machine shop or something like that that's full of lathes and machinery that's going to be damaged by water or moisture, then halon is the best option. But again, it is also the most expensive. This is also what most restaurants will have. You can't have a water-based system on top of a stove or on top of a big grill because if there's grease there, it's going to get worse. So a lot of places will have a halon extinguishing system. A number of extinguishers are labeled multi-purpose, and we already talked about that just a minute ago. That's similar along the same lines as that dry chemical. And you can look at the picture or the pictogram on the fire extinguisher so that you can actually see it. And just for reference, here's one right here. Okay, so hopefully the camera is capturing this, but we got basic instructions and then we have our 3 symbols. So this is a multi-purpose extinguisher. Now something else to look at. Part of the monthly safety inspection is looking at these extinguishers and making sure that they're in good shape. So each one of them has this tag, it's punched out. Fire extinguishers have a little gauge on them. And if you look at this one, the needle is very, very close in the middle of that green. If it's over here, it's already been used. It's not going to work if it's undercharged or if it's overcharged. So that's what this tag represents. If it's not okay to use this, they're going to take it out of service and they're going to put it another one in its place. And here's just a little reference chart. Shows you that that dry powder is probably the best candidate aside from halon. Okay, fire prevention. This goes along with the FPP, or fire prevention plan. Clean up all oil or fuel spills immediately. So if we're changing the oil on a vehicle and we miss the drain pan, we're going to clean that mess up before we do anything else. Same thing goes for gasoline. If you're putting a fuel pump in a car, almost every single time I put a fuel pump in a car, it comes in with a full tank of gas. So you got to drain that out, but inevitably you're going to spill some. So you're going to clean that up before you do anything else. Oil-soaked rags should be disposed of separately from regular waste. So you don't want to take a rag that's soaked with oil or gasoline and throw it in a regular trash can with paper and wood and other flammable products. We've got a proper way that we dispose of that stuff. All flammable liquids should be stored in a flame cabinet located in our back tool room. So this is something that you'll see on that safety test. Where should all flammable liquids, such as gasoline, spray paint cans, brake cleaner, anything that's in a compressed can, should be stored in that flammable cabinet that is located within our back tool room. And there's a picture of what it looks like. Ours isn't yellow, it's tan because it's been painted once before in its life. But almost every place that you work will have some cabinet that looks similar to this, and it just stores all those chemicals in one place. In the event of a fire, notify the instructor immediately. We have never had an uncontrolled fire in our auto shop, but that's not to say that one could not happen. So if something happens, if a fire erupts, notify me immediately. If the fire is containable, find the nearest fire extinguisher and put the fire out. If the fire is not containable, meaning that it's rapidly getting bigger, can't control it, just pull the fire alarm, call the fire department immediately. That's what they're for, they will come handle it. Okay, using a fire extinguisher. When using a fire extinguisher, it's important to remember the proper way. Very first thing you got to do is pull the pin out. If you don't pull the pin out, you can't squeeze the handle. The extinguisher will do you no good if you forget this step. Aim the nozzle at the base of the fire, where the flames are rising up. If you try to spray it down from the top, it's not going to work. Squeeze the trigger while aiming at the base of the fire and sweep it back and forth. Do not attempt to fight the fire if you do not have the proper equipment, do not have the proper training, or if you're unsure if you can control it. Call the fire department. And this is just an example of a burnout building, a burnout shop garage. We do not want that to be us. All right, general shop safety rules. Several safety practices should be used anytime you're in the lab. The very first thing, again, this goes along with compressed air, no horseplay. That means no pushing, no slapping, no touching each other for any reason while we're out in the shop or really in the classroom at all. That's something that I do not tolerate well. You guys are in high school, so do not do it. That is something that will get you removed immediately from the shop, and you may not come back. If you continue to be a problem, I will request that you stay in the classroom at all times, and you can't come outside and work on anything. So this is something that, again, I do not accept. I do not tolerate it. I will not allow it to happen in my auto shop. So don't do it. Okay, safety glasses. Everybody will be issued a pair of safety glasses. You must wear them anytime you are past the yellow line out of the shop area. Failure to have safety glasses will result in a loss of your daily grade. So that means if you come to class with no safety glasses, I'm going to have you borrow a pair from somewhere. And it's your responsibility to bring those to class. If you don't have safety glasses or you can't get a pair of safety glasses, you will not be able to participate in the lab. So again, this is something that we will give you the first pair. After that, it is on you to get them. So if they break, if you lose them, if you leave them in your vehicle, if you leave them at your home school, if you leave them on the bus, that's your problem. You were issued a pair of safety glasses. We have lockers here in the auto shop. You are more than welcome to pick a locker and a lock. You can keep your safety glasses in there, so they're here for you every single day. Also, I recommend just keeping maybe an old shirt, maybe an old pair of shoes in that locker as well, because a lot of students dress well for their other classes. They might not necessarily want to get their clean shoes and nice football jersey, for instance, all greasy and dirty. So keep this in your locker with a lock. That way it's there for you every single time you need it. You don't have to worry about transporting it back and forth if you leave it in the building. Appropriate clothing. Wear appropriate clothing in the auto lab. Some shops have stricter rules than others. For instance, in the welding lab, you're not supposed to wear like frayed clothing because the frays or threads can catch on fire. If you're working in a construction industry or have a construction class, you might be required to wear a hard hat or steel-toed boots. We don't have those restrictions in the auto shop. Here are the expectations for the auto shop. Expect to get dirty, number one. So bring clothes that you don't mind getting some dirt on. No tank tops, excessively short shorts, or open-toed shoes, meaning no Crocs, no flip-flops, no sandals. You must have on, at minimum, tennis shoes. You do not have to have on boots. Tennis shoes are a must. No loose or dangling jewelry. So I wear, a lot of times, my keys on the lanyard, and a lot of times I will take them off, or I'll wear a shirt with a pocket. I'll tuck the keys in the pocket. Long hair, if you're a female especially, if it's past your shoulders, it really needs to be tied back in a ponytail to prevent it from getting tangled up in any kind of moving equipment. Failure to dress appropriately will result in you not being able to go outside and work. So if you come to school with flip-flops or sandals and you don't have tennis shoes to change into, you can't go outside and work. I cannot permit you to go outside past the yellow line without proper footwear. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop this video, and we will pick up tomorrow on a separate video because this goes really into depth, and I've got some other examples and things and videos and things like that that I always like to share with students. So I'm going to stop the video right here. I will go ahead and post this one for you to see, and then I will post another one tomorrow. This is also usually the point in the class about where we would stop. So somewhere around 20 or 30 minutes of time. So I hope everybody has a good Monday, and look forward to seeing everybody this Friday. If you have not already, make sure that you fill out that attendance form that is within the auto app. And a few of you are still having trouble with that, in particular Spencer County students. And I've instructed those students just to notify me either by phone or email. Just send me a message in some way, shape, or form that just says I'm present. And I'm going to take that information and I'm just going to mark it on this sheet right here so that I can share this at the end of every week with the high schools. So if you can't access that attendance form, and again, that's mainly just for Spencer County, just let me know in some way, shape, or form that you are actively working today by saying I'm present or I'm here. All right, have a good Monday, and I'll be talking to you guys later this week.